War. We see it and experience it in our everyday lives. Many companies in our world today have actually become rich off of this thing we call war. But there's a small company in central Denmark that has seemingly taken a very strong stance against war. At least it appears that they have, but have they really? So the topic of weapons and warfare throughout LEGO history can be a pretty tricky and honestly complicated subject. A lot of LEGO fans can be pretty opinionated when it comes to the topic of war and weapons in LEGO, with Impossible Joke 7456 saying, "I thought the whole point of LEGO is that you can build whatever you want to build. If you want a war-related piece, go build it, but don't be upset when you don't see it in the kids' toy aisle." And Go Duck saying, "You probably need to look up the history of the revolver before making such ridiculous statements. Or what pirates did. LEGO has a long and strong history of violent themes. Why is it creepy to have a Sherman tank or a Huey, but happily have a knight or a cowboy?" So it's really going to take more than just some surface level company statements and online forums to really get to the bottom of if LEGO is really against war. In order to truly understand the viewpoint that LEGO has on war and weapons, we really need to understand how war affected Ole Kirk Christensen and his entire family back in the very beginning. Ole Kirk Christensen was born in 1891 and had quite a large family with 12 siblings in total. In his younger years, Ole had a passion for working with wood and would go on to work with his brother and eventually gain his journeyman certificate. After Ole's apprenticeship with his brother, Ole would go on to serve his first stint in the Danish military at the Citadel in Copenhagen. He would eventually get out of the military and continue his career in woodworking, but would be called back in 1914 when the First World War broke out in Europe. Throughout the course of World War I, Denmark really took an early stance of neutrality. Unlike the rest of Europe that was in major warfare and battle, Denmark took more the position of peace during that time. World War I would eventually come to an end in 1918, and things would start to slowly get back to normal. The years went by, and Ole and his wife Christine started to build a family as they fought through the days of the Great Depression and many of the issues that plagued his woodworking business during those days. In 1939, World War II took the world by storm as Hitler decided to invade Poland. It would be 8 short months later when German tanks would roll across the border of Denmark. On April 9th, 1940, Germany attacked Denmark with one of the fastest invasions of any country at only 6 hours. Ole, his family, and all of Denmark were now under the full control of Hitler and the Nazi regime, which plunged the entire country into a dark period. The war, surprisingly, was a huge boost for Ole Kirk and his small business LEGO. Sales increased 30 to 40% due to the high demand for toys during the war. The craziest thing about this was that during that period of war, that was actually a huge boost for Ole Kirk and LEGO. I believe sales increased right about 30 to 40% over those years, which is massive. That's basically the same amount of increase in sales as LEGO saw during COVID. Sales continued to be strong throughout this period of war, but Ole and his family would still feel the immense impact of the ongoing war in Europe. Ole wrote, "We are living with the horrors of war. Denmark is occupied by a rapacious people. Food is in increasingly short supply. It is a struggle to obtain the necessary commodities. The war may be why we have such a large turnover, yet that does not mean we wish the war to continue. We wish for peace across the whole world and pray, Lord, take this into your hands." Regardless of the many successes of Ole Kirk's business during this time, there was many hardships and struggles as they watched their country being torn apart along with most of Europe. During these years, Billund and the surrounding area was filled with German soldiers. There is even recounts of 2 German officers that stayed at Ole's home with him and his family. Ole was always polite to the officers when he came home from a long day's work, but made sure to keep them at a distance and keep communication with them to a minimum. So those are actually some pictures of Ole back during World War II. And the interesting thing is that the reason he kept communication to a minimum to those German officers that lived in his house, the Lion's House, was really because he was a part of the Danish resistance at that time, a sabotage group that would be against the Nazis and the Germans. And then it also goes on to talk about him being the head of the Billund's Town's Watchmen, which was a group that was formed after the Germans did away with the Danish police. And then in addition to that, he was also a town and group leader in the Danish Underground army. So Ole had his hands in a lot of resistance movements against the Germans, and this just kind of shows his activity and kind of some of his mindset behind war and against the Germans. Ole Kirk made sure to keep all his dealings away from his friends and specifically his sons. Although he was never directly involved with sabotage that we know of, he was a very integral part of transporting and storing weaponry, ammunition, and explosives. Godfred, his son, recounts finding out after the war that his dad would transport hand grenades and weaponry in empty wooden boxes that would also be used for their Lego wooden toys. So I've tried to do a little bit of research and digging on maybe the involvement of Ole Kirk's family, his extended family, like brothers, sisters, maybe nieces or nephews, and just kind of see what kind of their involvement in World War II was. And there's really not much out there, at least that I can find, on what their involvement may have been. But you've really got to think, with as big a family as he had, 12 siblings, that is a large family, and that means probably a lot of nieces and nephews. And with all that being said, you got to think that, Ole and Godfred, they must have really seen the effects of war firsthand, not only in their country, but with their friends that are around them there in Billund, with their family members. And that must have had a very profound effect on how they thought and how they viewed things and how things kind of transpired as time went on with their company Lego and just in their personal lives. After several long years of fighting back against the Nazi regime and losing many lives as well as seeing a lot of destruction to their home, Denmark was finally liberated by British forces in 1945. After the war, things could start getting back to normal, but over the course of the past year, Godfred had actually been working on a new toy idea. He had created a new prototype for a semi-automatic toy pistol made from wood. The sale of toy pistols was prohibited in 1945, but that did not stop Godfred from innovating. This small wooden pistol was a masterful work of design, complete with wooden frame, spring mechanisms, and the ability to load the pistol with wooden bullets. Godfred's desire was not to incite violence, but rather to make it a symbol of peace after the war. Thus was born the Peace Pistol. So here's what the back of the Peace Pistol packaging actually read. It says, "All healthy boys want a Peace Pistol. Will you, as the owner, remember the law of the gun? Never aim at a playmate in jest or in earnest." Pretty good. In the fall of 1945, the ban on selling toy guns was lifted, and immediately the demand for the Peace Pistol skyrocketed. Lego could barely keep up with the demand due to the shortages of wood, but this would not stop Ole Kirk and Godfred. They began the journey into plastic toy production, and in the following years would eventually come out with a plastic version of the Peace Pistol in 1949. Lego would go on to produce multiple colors of the Peace Pistol, variations of gun targets, and would eventually get all the way to Army machine guns. There's limited information on when, how, and where these items may have been produced, but regardless, weaponry became a core part of the business model of Lego after the war and was an integral part in helping to grow the company. The new transfer into plastic toys would eventually lead Ole and Godfred down the amazing path of the Lego brick or automatic binding bricks. Lego would begin creating all sorts of brick building sets with trains, Duplo for toddlers, Technic, but then in 1978, things would change with the introduction of Lego Castle. Kjeld, Godfred's son, was now leading Lego and would soon become the CEO in 1979. He would help introduce the first Lego Castle set with the Yellow Castle number 375. This set first introduces weapons back into Lego with the introduction of Lego swords, halberds, and lances. So the castle theme and castle sets are by far some of my favorites growing up. They were definitely something that I think Lego was trying to appeal to that younger audience in order to create that army building experience, to be able to battle the different minifigures and the different castle factions. Lego would then begin to expand on this with spears, bows and arrows, axes, cavalry, siege equipment, and much more. Lego was definitely seeing success with the introduction of castle, and they would continue to double down. Some early Lego space sets, like this Space Buggy set number 886 from 1979, included what appeared to be a blaster or some sort of a space gun. But Lego,
preferred to call it a space tool or scanner of some kind.
This would be a bit of a stretch, but LEGO continued to move forward with more weapons. The LEGO pirate theme would later come out in 1989 and would include all sorts of weapons in the form of flintlock pistols, muskets, pirate swords, cannons, and opposing sides, the pirates and Imperials, to face off with one another.
Then the biggest partnership of all happens. LEGO partners up with Star Wars in 1999, and they create this amazing new lineup of sets in those early days. I mean, just check some of these out.
Star Wars would introduce this entire new world of weapons and starships. We started to see everything from lightsabers to recreate iconic Star Wars battle scenes in LEGO form, all the way to battle droids and blasters. LEGO would continue to develop this theme over the years with incredibly detailed spaceships and more weapons. And let me tell you, the LEGO fans were here for it. Fans began to create these massive Star Wars army with hundreds, if not thousands, of minifigures, gunships, and everything you could think of to create an incredible galactic space force. LEGO would later go on to approve and release the LEGO Sopwith Camel in 2010, which is a replica of the British fighter aircraft from World War I. They would then go on to release several Indiana Jones sets that had aircraft that were reminiscent of German planes from World War II and would even include the infamous logo of the German Luftwaffe.
LEGO was now fully in the middle of creating all sorts of weapons and machinery and armies, but they were just about to get into one of the biggest controversies of all.
In the summer of 2020, LEGO was ready to release their new August 1st Technic set lineup, and LEGO fans were excited to say the least. Included in this lineup was the now infamous Technic Bell Boeing V-22 Osprey, set number 42113. The set was an exact replica of the $71.3 million aircraft made by Boeing. It depicted a search and rescue version of the aircraft in a nice orange and gray color. The aircraft was complete with motorized functions that turned on the engines and allowed for the full movement of the rotary blades. With this set about to release in August, the German peace organization found out about its release and got involved and put out this statement. In August, LEGO will release the new set 42113 Bell Boeing V-22 Osprey. It is a novelty, as it is LEGO's first ever military vehicle, which is currently being used by armies around the globe. The new LEGO set is released with an official license from Boeing and Bell. According to data from the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, Boeing has been the second largest arms company in 2018, with global arms sales totaling $29.15 billion US. According to the same data, Bell achieved rank 27 with a total of 3.18 billion euro or 3.5 billion US dollars in arms sales. We are not happy with this cooperation and the new military LEGO set. With this statement and ongoing protests of the set, LEGO would then respond with their own statement. The LEGO Technic Bell Boeing Osprey V-22 was designed to highlight the important role the aircraft plays in search and rescue efforts. While our set depicts a rescue version of the plane, the aircraft is predominantly used by the military. We have a long-standing policy not to create sets which feature military vehicles, and in this case, we have not adhered to our own internal guidelines. As a result, we are currently reviewing our plans to launch this project on August 1st. LEGO would go on to cancel the set, stating that the aircraft was a replica of a modern military vehicle and thus violated their long-standing policy of not creating military vehicles.
And wouldn't you know it, a few of the V-22 Ospreys made it out into the wild, and now you can find them on the secondary market for anywhere from $800 to $1,000 a piece.
So what does all this mean? LEGO made this statement on their guidelines for weapons in conflict, and it reads as follows. A large number of LEGO minifigures use weapons and are assumedly regularly being charged by each other's weapons as part of a children's role play. In the LEGO group, we acknowledge that conflict in play is especially prevalent among 4 to 9-year-old boys. An inner drive and a need to experiment with their own aggressive feelings in order to learn about other people's aggressions exist in most children. children. As such, the LEGO Group sees conflict play as perfectly acceptable and an integral part of children's development. The basic aim is to avoid realistic weapons and military equipment that children may recognize from hotspots around the world, and to refrain from showing violent or frightening situations when communicating about LEGO products. At the same time, the purpose is for the LEGO brand not to be associated with issues that glorify conflicts and unethical or harmful behavior. So reading that, obviously LEGO clearly acknowledges the fact that they have weapons in their sets, but I have two issues with that. The first one being there are a lot of LEGO sets that LEGO could come out with that are not based on modern conflicts. Obviously, the Sopwith Camel is not a modern conflict airplane. That was a World War I airplane. Secondly, and probably biggest of all, is the phrase to avoid realistic weapons and military equipment that children may recognize. LEGO is no longer a fully children-geared company. Are a large part of the brand and sets geared toward children? Sure, but there is also now just as much of a customer base for the adult fan that I think will continue to grow over time. This is not just a toy on the shelf anymore. This is a collector's model, a hobby for adults around the world. Adults should be able to understand the difference of just building a model of a tank or an airplane versus direct involvement in real warfare. When Gottfried first created that very first wooden pistol, he called it the Peace Pistol. This was a weapon, yes, but it was a weapon of peace in Gottfried's mind. Something that maybe helped his oppressed family and friends gain their freedom back from an oppressive German power and bring peace back to their home. I think to answer the main question, we need to put aside whether or not LEGO has created plastic weapons and whether they are looked at as promoting war or peace, and just look at what this small plastic brick truly is. The LEGO brick is a way to bring parents and their kids together to create lasting memories and friendships. The LEGO brick, in its truest form, promotes all of these things, and most of all, peace.